The escalating conflict in the Middle East is triggering a critical supply chain crisis for South Korea's manufacturing sector. Disrupted shipping routes have drastically cut imports of essential materials like naphtha and aluminum, threatening to halt production across the petrochemical and automotive industries. For more, our business and economy team correspondent Do-yeon joins us here in the studio. Welcome, Do-yeon.
Good to be here.
So, Do-yeon, let's start with the petrochemical sector. We are hearing about severe naphtha shortages. Now, South Korea refines its own crude oil, but why is this industry facing so much immediate crisis?
Right. Now, it is a structural vulnerability in the supply chain. Now, as you said, naphtha is a foundational material for essential goods, including food packaging, medical syringes, and automotive components. Now, South Korea produces roughly 55% of its required naphtha domestically by refining crude oil, like you said, but relies on imports to fill in the remaining 45%. The core issue is that the Middle East accounts for 77% of those imported volumes. Because both imported naphtha shipments and crude oil deliveries have been delayed by the blocked shipping routes, the domestic supply has been severely fractured. Unlike the United States and China, which can synthesize basic chemicals from domestic natural gas and coal, South Korea's manufacturing infrastructure is strictly bound to crude-derived naphtha. Analysts emphasize this creates a rigid structural trap during geopolitical crises.
South Korea and Japan are in the exact same situation. Because both lack natural resources but are manufacturing powerhouses, the Middle East has always treated Korea as an unconditional big buyer.
Now, Do-yeon, the automotive industry is also facing major disruptions, specifically due to aluminum shortages. Why is this sector causing such a bottleneck, and why are experts pointing to May and June as the critical period?
Now, that's right. The Middle East accounts for about 10% of global primary aluminum production, and because of the blockade in the Strait, the price of aluminum has gone up to a 4-year high. Processed aluminum has become increasingly critical for automakers as they transition to electric vehicles, which require the material for lightweight vehicle frames and battery casings. Now, as we all know, auto exports are one of the pillars of the nation's export economy, and analysts say that this could see a severe production delay.
Because a car doesn't just consist of one or two things, if the raw material supply for core components is affected, the car has 30,000 parts. And if a problem arises with just one or two, they can't be produced.
Automakers typically maintain an inventory buffer of 3 to 6 months for parts. However, the prolonged nature of this conflict means those domestic stockpiles will reach a critical depletion point by May and June. If raw materials are not secure by then, delayed shipments will directly collide with peak manufacturing schedules, overloading the industry's just-in-time production systems and stalling operations.
I see. Then, Do-yeon, this brings us to the government response. What specific measures have been taken to mitigate this supply chain emergency? And the president also had to make remarks about this issue, right?
Right. So as we have been reporting, the government has been implementing contingency plans since the early stages of the supply shock. Now, last month, the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Resources initiated a 5-month export restriction on domestically produced naphtha to keep volumes inside the country alongside an emergency supply adjustment order for 7 critical base oils. The ministry also deployed a 130 billion won export voucher to subsidize surging freight costs for affected companies and apply zero tariff quotas on essential imported base materials. Now, earlier today, like you said, during the senior secretaries meeting, the president addressed the supply chain risks directly and reiterated the recent measures to bypass the Middle East choke point.
중동 전쟁이 7주차에 접어들면서 제조업 전반으로 공급망 리스크가 빠르게 확대될 수 있습니다. 이런 가운데 중동 중앙아시아 4개국과 원유 2억 7,300만 배럴, 나프타 210만 톤을 대체 공급선을 확보했는데 국내 수급 안정 그리고 경제 산업 피해 최소화에 크게 도움이 될 것 같습니다.
The president also emphasized that the government must quickly process the necessary procedures to bring these secure volumes into the country. Furthermore, a $1 billion supply chain stabilization fund has been actively mobilized to assist domestic manufacturers in absorbing the surging production costs until the alternative supply lines are fully operational.
I see. Do-yeon, thank you for the analysis tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.